Stipe Miocic versus Francis Ngannou 2. The rematch takes place this weekend in the main event of UFC 260, Miocic versus Ngannou 2, and I can't wait for this heavyweight main event. I've been looking forward to this one for the longest of times now. Ngannou has finally worked his way back up to a title shot again, and it's against the same man who beat him the first time. You could not write it any better. Stipe Miocic. Can Francis Ngannou overcome the man who beat him before? And in my opinion, the only true loss in the UFC so far in his career. I know he lost to Derek Lewis, but come on, no one won that Derek Lewis bout, and I don't even think Francis Ngannou was in the cage that day. It was just some random guy called Francis that showed up in the cage and decided to throw no punches whatsoever. So the only real man to beat a good Ngannou who is showing up to KO someone in the first round has been Stipe Miocic so far, and Stipe Miocic himself on another good set of wins against Daniel Cormier, a great win streak right now to close out the trilogy and really cement himself again as the greatest heavyweight of all time. I know the UFC doesn't really like saying those words because I keep hearing them saying the most decorated UFC champion in the heavyweight division of all time. Just say it how it is. Stipe Miocic is the greatest heavyweight of all time, and even if he loses to Ngannou this weekend, it's going to be a while before Ngannou overcomes that, because Stipe Miocic broke the record for title defenses in the division, beat Daniel Cormier twice, who at the time was number one pound for pound when he moved up to heavyweight and took the belt in the first place. I mean, Stipe Miocic, he's not only broke the record, but he's coming back, and now he might be on his way to do it again, and there is so much up for grabs in this fight because the winner of this one gets a chance to beat Jon Jones. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, well, maybe you don't want to win because Jon Jones is so savage. I think the legacy that you can gain from beating Jon Jones moving up to heavyweight is the best legacy a heavyweight is ever going to get, because these light heavyweight champions moving up is the only real chance that a heavyweight has at calling themselves somewhat of a double champ, you know what I mean? Because they can't go a division above. They've got to take on the guys below, and what better guy to take on from a below division than the greatest of all time at light heavyweight, Jon Jones. A lot of stuff up for grabs here. If Stipe Miocic can beat Ngannou, then Jon Jones, I might say he's the greatest of all time, period. Those are really good scalps to have. Beating Ngannou again, on top of the names he's already beaten. Daniel Cormier twice. No steroid situation with Stipe either. No little weird moments. I mean, one eye poke against DC, but that made him like 1-10 on eye pokes with Daniel Cormier because DC really tore up his eyes in the first few fights as well. But now DC has taught Stipe Miocic the art of the eye poke. Don't be surprised if we see Stipe going out there and flicking a couple fingers out there here and there while Ngannou's swinging wildly, but I don't think that's how he's going to win this bout. I think he's going to win this fight with Francis Ngannou by TKO in the later rounds. I think he's going to do it better than last time and put a better pace on Ngannou than last time as well, because you don't know, he's trimmed down a little bit. His footwork's got way better. He's putting a little bit less steam into his shots. He's really taking his time with his boxing, looking a lot better, looking a bit more technical as well, not really rushing himself like he would do before, really putting a good solid pace on his fights, because the first fight with Francis Ngannou for a Miocic bout was like hard work for him, and he was tired by the end of that fight as well. If you look at the output in the two Daniel Cormier fights he's just had in the rematch and the trilogy, it's like nearly double on significant strikes compared to the Ngannou bout. And I know that Ngannou in that fight was on the ground and Stipe had to use a lot more wrestling than he did against DC, but still the output that he had in the DC fight to come back in the fourth round in a heavyweight bout, that doesn't get talked about enough. Like, people talk about the comeback of Stipe Miocic finding those body shots, but to do it as a heavyweight in the fourth round, look at the fights we see at heavyweight. They do not push great paces in those later rounds. It really starts to slow down across the board amongst heavyweight contenders. But with Stipe Miocic, there's just a different kind of pace that he has. At heavyweight, he can really put shots together in those later rounds and find himself to finish. And he found that body shot against DC. I predicted Stipe Miocic to TKO DC in the later rounds in the rematch. Then I picked him to win the trilogy as well, and he's done me no wrong so far. I'm going to pick him against Ngannou again because I know that Stipe Miocic did something against Ngannou that night at UFC 220 in Boston that no one had done to Ngannou before. And that was time a perfect takedown as Ngannou swung wildly. Curtis Blaydes did it before in the first fight that they had, but Blaydes is not nearly the level of wrestler that Stipe Miocic is. I think that's clear now to see. Stipe Miocic out-grappling DC in certain moments. That just can't be ignored. I mean, Stipe Miocic's grappling has improved so much, and that's something else I want to talk about here. His grappling has improved. People are talking about, has Ngannou improved? I'm talking about, I know Stipe has improved. I feel like that's the big difference here when I'm trying to make a prediction video for this fight. If I were to make a Francis Ngannou prediction video, I would say, Stipe got lucky and Ngannou missed last time, and this time he's going to land it. You watch. In the first minute, he'll land that big shot. Like, I don't know how else I could make a video breaking down how Ngannou would win this fight without a whole bunch of ifs and maybe this will happen and I think this and I think that. But I know that Stipe Miocic, since that first fight with Francis Ngannou, has gotten in better shape. He's gotten faster. His footwork's gotten better. We have evidence of all of this because a trilogy where a guy loses the first fight is one of the best examples of an improving fighter compared to a slowing down fighter we can ever have in the sport of MMA. He loses the first fight to DC. In the second fight, he is losing the second fight and finds a way to come back and win against Daniel Cormier. I just fucking smacked my funny bone on my desk. And that's really put off some momentum that I had going there. Either way, while that pain really tries to subside while I continue with my speech, in the second fight with DC, he found a way in the middle of the fight to get it done against Daniel Cormier. In the third fight, he just straight up beat DC. Okay, it was a real gradual climb in Stipe Miocic's career, and even in the wrestling of those bouts. In the first fight, he was losing the clinch exchanges, in fact, lost in the end by KO because of a clinch exchange. He was getting a little bit... DC's very tricky in the clinch. He set some traps in the clinch for Stipe Miocic, took advantage of him and got the KO blow in the first round after landing a brutal eye poke as well, by the way, which blinded Stipe in the same eye that he got KO'd on the side of eventually, and who knows why Stipe didn't see that shot coming. Maybe it's because DC's fucking knuckles were in his eye. But either way, in the rematch, DC was beating Stipe in the grappling again. His whole point about the rematch was to go out there and out-grapple Stipe Miocic. He did that early in the fight. Stipe recovered, used some good grappling on Daniel Cormier as well. But in the first round of the rematch, Stipe was on the ground, DC was on top of him, and DC was kind of beating the shit out of him in the first round of that rematch. Eventually, Stipe comes back, thank God for him. Trilogy comes around. Stipe is in no danger against Daniel Cormier when it comes to the grappling whatsoever. He's reversing positions. He's rolling around on the ground, escaping bad positions once DC eventually does get him down. He's shooting on DC. He's getting some good control time against the cage. He won a lot of that trilogy against DC, against the cage in the clinch. That was something we didn't really expect to see because DC had some good moments in the clinch previously in their bouts. That shows me that Stipe has improved. His speed, his footwork, his boxing, his IQ in the cage as well, to do what he did in the trilogy against DC and really pick him apart. Don't get me wrong, he also landed an eye poke there, but DC landed an eye poke on Stipe in that trilogy as well, so an eye for an eye is what I say. But moving on, he's improved his wrestling, in my opinion, and not only has he improved his wrestling, but he's been focused on his wrestling. You can improve your wrestling, but go out there and fight a striker and you're never gonna... It doesn't really mean anything to me. But the fact that he's been working on his wrestling... wow. The fact that Stipe has been working on his wrestling for Daniel Cormier 3 fight camps in a row, and not just 3 fight camps, because remember, Stipe Miocic sat out on the sideline after his DC fight and said, I'm fighting DC in a rematch next year. So that entire time, I'm sure he was working on his grappling. In the time between the rematch and the trilogy, he knew the trilogy was going to happen. It was just whenever he wanted it to happen, because that was the whole thing in the heavyweight division for the last 3 years, waiting for Stipe to make a comeback, because as much as I love Stipe Miocic, the one thing that does kind of annoy me about his career is how inactive he is. But then again, that's maybe because of DC gouging his eyes out. As we know, he had some time off for that as well. But still, he has been training his wrestling for his opponents in his last 3 bouts of his career for the last 3 years. Before the first Ngannou fight, Stipe Miocic wasn't training grappling. He was fighting JDS. He was fighting... insert other heavyweight name that isn't a grappler. Oh, Alistair Overeem as well in another title defense. Those were his previous 2 title defenses before he went out there against Francis Ngannou the first time. In fact, he had a quick turnaround as well, because Ngannou had a 3-week turnaround. But Stipe was putting together some good wins. He was nice and active when he first got the belt. So he's had a long time to work on that wrestling to go out there against Francis Ngannou. And I think it's going to be a huge factor here. And I think he's just simply going to ragdoll him as soon as the fight starts. He's going to land some good shots early, and Ngannou's going to start swinging, and as soon as Ngannou starts swinging, I think Stipe's going to duck underneath, take a single leg, take a double leg, get Ngannou to the ground, and I think the question is not can Ngannou beat Stipe, it's can Ngannou win the first minute of this fight. I don't think he can. I don't. It's not about, but now Ngannou's going to do better in the second round. I don't believe he can do better in the second round. Like, maybe he'll have a little bit more in the tank than he did before. But if Stipe sets the pace and sets the standard of the fight that he's going to be taking Ngannou down and controls him on the ground in that first round, like I think he's going to go out there and plan to do, then, like, I don't think there is a chance for Ngannou as this fight goes on. Like, he is not a man made to go 5 rounds. Stipe Miocic is a man made to go 5 rounds. Now, Stipe Miocic is not a man made to fucking decapitate Alistair Overeem and send him into fucking orbit. Ngannou is a man made for that. So, in my opinion, this comes down to, who do you think wins the first minute? I think Stipe is going to take him down in the first minute. And I think that's going to really put off Ngannou's timing. And the way that Ngannou looked against Derek Lewis, because of the fears that he was having from the previous Stipe Miocic fight, you can tell me that he's recovered from that. But if he's standing in there looking at Stipe Miocic, I don't think he's going to be a switched on savage in there. I think he's going to be looking a little bit sweaty. He's going to be looking a little bit flustered. And I think Stipe's going to bring back some bad memories. And I think he's going to get the takedown because of it. And I think Ngannou's going to be too hesitant, too much. And I think Stipe's going to get the job done again. Welcome to the dark ages of MMA. I love Stipe Miocic, but it's very clear that Ngannou has the star power here. But Jan Blachowicz just did this to Israel Adesanya. I think that Stipe's going to get it done. I really do. Like, the star power that we could have in a division is going to be somewhat ruined by a Slavic savage, I must say, from Stipe Miocic. Jan Blachowicz did the same thing. I think it's going to slow down these conversations of the huge money fights. But listen here. I would much rather Stipe Miocic beat Francis Ngannou and fight Jon Jones. I love the fight between Ngannou and Jon Jones, don't get me wrong. I love that it's the scary Ngannou versus the Jon Jones. Jon Jones, if he loses to Stipe, is probably going to lose like a decision or a TKO in the later rounds, just to some ground and pound shots. If Jon Jones loses to Ngannou, we're going to see Jon Jones out cold on the canvas, and that is just too much to like pass up on the opportunity of. So I'd understand the anticipation behind the Ngannou and Jones fight, but in my opinion, as a hardcore MMA fan, I want to see the Miocic versus Jones fight as well, because I know that it means the greatest heavyweight of all time, Stipe Miocic, versus the greatest light heavyweight of all time, Jon Jones. Super fights happen in a sport. They don't often happen between the two greatest of all time in their current prime, in their careers, taking on each other. That never really happens with super fights. We get McGregor versus Alvarez. We get Adesanya versus Jan Blachowicz, and it's not really the same thing. You know what I mean? We have DC versus Stipe, and even that was not the same thing because DC lost to Jon Jones. We very rarely get two of the greatest of all time in there together in this sport. It just so happens that they're around the same weight class. And I think that would be the biggest fight to happen in a very long time. I love that matchup. But still, I think Stipe's going to get the job done against Francis Ngannou. There are some things to talk about that do favour Ngannou here. DC KO'd Stipe in the fight after the Ngannou bout. But Stipe went into that DC fight on a quick turnaround after the Ngannou first fight. And he took a lot of damage in that Ngannou fight. Even though he didn't really lose too much in that fight. I don't even think he lost a round. He still took a lot of big shots off a guy like Ngannou, and that's going to leave some residual damage. And he got eye poked in that first DC fight, but still he got KO'd in that bout. So with some Ngannou fans, you could bet based on the fact that you think, hey, I think DC maybe took Stipe's chin, and maybe Ngannou's now going to go out there and have an easier time finding that KO punch, and maybe Stipe is not going to have the same level of chin anymore. Maybe you could say something like Ngannou's a little bit smaller now, so he's going to be a little bit faster, and Stipe's not going to expect that. I would hit you right back with an argument that Stipe is also a little bit smaller, so I think his footwork is going to get way better, and I think his fight IQ has gotten better as well. There's also an argument to say that maybe Francis Ngannou is just some force to be reckoned with, and he's just going to land that punch, and Guru, you have to accept it. Skill doesn't win fights. Ngannou wins fights, and I just don't see it happening. I don't know. I can see him winning. I understand that he has the chance to land a KO blow, but as a predictor, predicting fights, I can't formulate an argument for Ngannou against Stipe Miocic. I've got to go Stipe. I've got to go my boy. OH! I'm going to go Stipe Miocic. Goodbye. Thank you for watching. Click that button up there. Like and subscribe. Toodle pip. I'll see you later.